This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, with agriculture broadcaster Orion Samuelson and yours truly, Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Parts availability is a challenge across the countryside, but farmers are pressing forward with harvest nonetheless. Hello everybody, welcome to This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson here in the studio today, and we certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us. It's a busy time out in farm country, of course, as we get into fall. We get into the main part of harvest across much of the Corn Belt, and harvest is moving along fairly well. As of Monday, October 10th, USDA had the corn crop at 40% harvested nationwide. That's 10 percentage points ahead of the 5-year average. And the soybean crop was 49% harvested. That's running about 9% faster. We're going to go to several different locations across the country to hear how harvest is going. Chad Colby has our first update, taking a look at the corn and bean crop in Illinois.
Mike, there's been a lot of harvest progress over the last several weeks with great weather, but this past week we did get some pretty exciting weather across the Midwest. That's a nice way to say it. It kind of slowed things down. There was a lot of this in many places of the Midwest. Some inclement weather took guys out of the field. As most of you know, with the warmer temperatures we've had the last few weeks, it's allowed producers to get in the fields and get this corn crop harvested. In a lot of places, I would tell you they're above average as far as how much they've got out over the last several years. You have to remember, though, in many places of the Midwest, there's a lot of down corn, and this warm weather has certainly helped that. As far as the soybeans goes, that's the crop we're lagging behind a little bit. I talked to several producers this week that are hoping this next 10-day window is going to be very favorable for getting their crops out. As far as some of those specialty crops like sugar beets, up in North Dakota, I talked to a producer that's doing pretty well. They've had some rain in that region as well. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thanks, Chad. There has been a lot of harvest progress across Iowa and Illinois. I know in my recent travels, I have seen a lot of combines out working in the fields. But something similar is happening in Kansas as well. We had a chance to talk with Griff Howard. He's a farmer in Hiawatha, Kansas, and we asked how harvest was shaping up in his part of the world.
We've had good rainfall throughout the summer, and we stayed away from the real hot temperatures. And we're about halfway through harvest right now, and we've had record yields on corn. We've started in on some soybeans, and we're seeing record yields on soybeans as well. Northeast Kansas isn't your typical Kansas, flat land. It's we're pretty rolling. We have a lot of terraced. Most all of our fields are terraced, and we farm primarily on the contours, so a lot of rolling hills. But it's very productive ground here.
Well, record yield reports coming out of Northeast Kansas. A lot of things to keep our eye on as those combines keep moving. Let's go a little farther north to Morse Bluff, Nebraska, to farmer Dan Wesley. How's harvest looking up there?
It's been really nice. We've had, surprisingly, the little amount of rain we've had this year, it's done its thing, and we're into a nice fall and nice weather. We've actually only had one major rain in the middle of harvest, and that's actually been beneficial. Some of the beans earlier on were coming out too dry, and it kind of brought the moisture up, and so which brought the yield up a little better and more at the ideal 12-13% moisture beans. So harvest's been going along really well. People are really getting after it, and we're expecting another rainfall here, so that'll put things to a standstill for a while, but things been going really well. I finished my soybeans this last week, and they got a good start on corn, so the goal is to be done by Halloween. So right now we're on pace, so we'll see what happens. Corn's drying down, and if I can get to a point where I don't have to dry it anymore and go straight to storage, that'll certainly speed things along.
That was Dan Wesley making some harvest progress in Morse Bluff, Nebraska. Now we're going to go a little farther north to South Dakota. We're going to check in with one of our, favorite market analysts who is also a farmer, Dwayne Bossy, up around Britton, South Dakota. Dwayne, how has harvest been up there?
Actually, it's been very good. We started in about mid to late September in the Dakotas for the most part. Weather was very warm and very dry. So we went pretty hard on the beans early, and you can see that in the crop progress with North and South Dakota well ahead of the normal pace on soybean harvest. We did get some rain last Friday that shut us down in northern South Dakota and North Dakota down for this past week, but a little break like that can be expected every once in a while.
Yeah, it's nice to have a little time to do some tune-ups. Dwayne, let's talk about yields. When those beans are coming out of the field up there, how are they doing?
Well, in the eastern part of South Dakota and the eastern part of North Dakota, we're definitely hitting that bingo card of better than expected. In fact, you get over right along the Minnesota line, we're hearing record yields for some places for beans. It's those August rains, Mike. They came in just in the nick of time for the soybean harvest anyway, or the soybean yield. So better than expected for sure.
Now, with the rain that's kept some folks out of the field this past week, have you and your neighbors been making much progress on the corn crop?
Just a little bit here and there. There's some corn coming off of North and South Dakota, a little bit more in North Dakota, which kind of shows the drought they had, right? If harvest progress is that ahead of pace in North Dakota, it means it dried down a little too early and died off, actually. So, I mentioned the rains came in perfect time for the soybean crop, but I think it might have been just a little bit late for corn. We're still going to have decent corn yields, and if you got that shot of rain, you're going to have 200 bushel corn in areas, but USA is probably really close to online with our corn and soybean yields in North and South Dakota now. All
right, definitely a lot of things to keep an eye on as those combines get back out in the field this next week. Dwayne Bossy, thanks so much for talking to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Those harvest results will keep rolling in over the next several weeks, and we wish everybody who's out there harvesting a safe and successful harvest season. And as harvest rolls on, it's definitely moving the markets. We're going to talk to Dale Dirkholz from Grain Cycles about what all is going on. And Dale, this past week we had the USDA release their October supply and demand report estimates. Looks like this bean crop continues to grow. Was that a surprise to you?
In one sense, not really. When you looked at some of the details of the USDA report back in September, you knew that, or at least you had a good feeling, higher yield was going to come on this particular crop itself. And so looking at the higher numbers that we're seeing and, hearing the anecdotal evidence, even from the field itself over the last couple of weeks, the higher number on yield and production wasn't really a surprise. Maybe the magnitude was a little bit more than I expected to see here, but I think we've pretty well honed in on both the corn and soybean crops for where we're going to end up in the end.
Dale, with regard to soybean products, both meal and oil, the oil sector has certainly been hot this past year. Do you think that trend is going to continue for oil to keep leading the bean market higher?
I think we're going to tend to stall out a little bit here. The problem we're starting to see is those consuming countries around the world. India, for example, is taking off some tariffs on imported oil. People starting to recognize at this particular juncture that the cost of cooking oil itself and what it means to the bottom line for consumers in terms of food costs, are starting to get a little onerous. So I'm starting to suspect we're going to start to see a little bit of pushback, and I'm also seeing, more talk about the food versus fuel debate when we get into this whole energy sector. So it's going to be interesting to watch how that unfolds. But I suspect at this point the oil game is probably pretty much, stalled out in its upward drive for the moment.
We're getting the crops out of the field up here in this hemisphere, but down in South America, that crop is going in the ground. Dale, I know you keep track of what's happening around the world. How does Brazilian soybean planting look so far?
We're Mato Grosso, which is the big state to the north. I know its planting is roughly about 20% complete, and that was of concern because that was among the drier areas down there, but they've had some good rains of recent. Planting has gone pretty aggressively. Actually, the 20% pace for Mato Grosso itself is at the higher end of the range on their pace for this date over the last 5 years. So things are going well. You got people that have questions about, how will the crops turn out? Argentina's in particular because of the developing La Nina that we seem to be having in the Pacific, and that will tend to impact southern Brazil and down into Argentina. At least normally it does, more than anywhere else. But right now people seem to be pretty comfortable that, we're going to have at least good crops coming out of that country down there, albeit we have a lot of unknowns for the next few months.
We do, and I know that shipping has been an issue. Are crops able to move out of South America?
And that's been an issue everywhere itself, moving stuff, even as you look here in the U.S., and the export shipments were finally getting back up to speed after the problems with Hurricane Ida down in New Orleans. But still, we seem to be dragging a little bit. I think that's going to be an ongoing issue because you can't fully divert everything. And then China, you got these questions about demand on the other end because of the energy problems in China, some of the crush plants being shut down in China. And what does it mean, to ultimate imports of soybeans into China itself over the next year?
A lot of things to consider. We'll be back for more with Dale Dirkholz when we return. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by AgriGold, your seed ally in the field, with unparalleled options that perform on your farm. Learn more at agrigold.com. And we're back talking markets with Dale Dirkholz of Grain Cycles. Dale, we also saw this corn crop continue to grow. Looked like the market was maybe anticipating that a little bit more. What do you think about those USDA numbers?
It was anticipating that a little bit more. I think at this point, people were kind of listening. Some of the corn yields coming in, especially in the Western Corn Belt, a little bit better than what some of them expected to see. When I look at the internal data, though, from the USDA, and I'll not hard argue with their yield estimate of 176.5, but I still wonder if our corn yields aren't going to end up a smidgen lower than where we're projected right now. But, at most, I'm thinking maybe a bushel or something like that. I don't think we have any big misses this year like we did a year ago.
And that's all on the supply side. On the demand side, Dale, we did see USDA kick up the export demand expectation for this coming year. Do you think they're getting close to what total exports might look like?
Well, the export number at this particular point is still kind of a quote-unquote fudge factor. If you have huge supplies, I can afford to dial in a bigger number. If I'm tighter, I can take it down a little bit. And certainly with that supply staying up a little bit, and also indications, feed and residual, we're going to be down a little bit. You had the room to advance that export number up a little bit. That also is an acknowledgement, when you start looking around the world at what kind of production numbers that we're having in various competitive countries, and the uncertainty with second crop corn out of Brazil this coming year is still in play. They probably want, we're going to see this demand start to kick up, and wheat supplies generally being a little bit tighter could shift a little bit about that feed demand that we normally see for wheat back into corn too. So I think there was room for them to do that. And certainly with a 1.5 billion bushel carryout, it's not like we're really going to be tight, although we're not real burdensome either.
Well, that's true. But Dale, I want to pick your mind about something else. Earlier this week, the Labor Department released their CPI, or Consumer Price Index data, and it showed that inflation is still here. And in fact, food and energy prices were really driving about half of what consumers experienced for price increases. Does that have you concerned as we're heading into winter?
I think that is an area people need to keep an eye on at this point, especially those people in the livestock industry. And the reason I mention that, if we have especially a hard winter across, the major population areas, the kind of heating costs that we could have this winter could really start to blunt demand for meats, which are the high item cost, when you look at your retail grocer's food basket itself. And so as I go on into the winter months themselves, because energy prices are where they're already at today, if they stay high and heating costs really are a lot higher this winter, it could really start to blunt the demand in the meat sector as we get into January, February, and March, when those heating bills really start to hit home. On the flip side of this, because of what we're hearing about things on Christmas right now, and people starting to come to grips with the idea, we may not have as many packages under the Christmas tree this year. That leaves a little bit extra money, to pay for meat and pay for consumables that we may not otherwise.
That is a really good point. I have heard now the expectation is at 73 days to get goods from China into the U.S. And of course, we're closer to Christmas than that. Dale, we certainly always appreciate your insights here on This Week in Agribusiness. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us this week about what all is happening in the world of markets.
Hey, good talking to you guys too.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform. Combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
Corn genetics has continued to improve a lot over the past 25 years, and one of the things that's come with that is a much tougher corn stalk. That affords a lot of options when it comes time to harvest, but it can create some challenges with residue. Chad Colby explains.
Do you struggle with the residue management in your cornfields? Hi everyone, I'm Chad Colby, and on this week's tech segment, I want to talk to you about an attachment that goes underneath your corn head from Yetter Manufacturing. It's called the Stalk Devastator. And last weekend, I was helping a friend of mine harvest corn, and I posted a few photos of the Devastator in action, and I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of questions I got. In fact, I had a couple great conversations with producers about how to utilize this attachment. Now, it's not new. It's been out for 10 years. The concept came from a young farmer in Indiana, and it solved that age-old problem. How do I protect my tires and tracks in my cornfields? Because we all know the damage it does. But the Stalk Devastator does a lot more than that. Its rolling reel helps to break down, if you would, or accelerate your corn stalks breaking down and increase that microbial activity. Now, personally, I really like the fact that it doesn't use any horsepower and it doesn't take any extra fuel, and you're already making that trip across the field. But for a lot of producers, the big thing it does is it keeps that residue mat intact. So you're not breaking the residue up into small pieces, and those pieces are either getting blown off your fields or washed away during the winter. Now, if you do your homework on this attachment, you're going to see that there's a lot of independent research out there that says there's a 3 to 5 bushel increase in your soybeans the year following corn after using Devastator. Again, if you're trying to manage that residue in your field, it's a great attachment that's been around for quite a while. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. And a tool like Stalk Devastators might make more sense in a year like this where there is concern about securing tires if you do have a blowout. We always appreciate your updates, Chad. Later on in the episode, Max is going to introduce us to a new grower in our next installment of the Plan Smart, Grow Smart series from BASF. Stick around. We're all kind of getting tired of talking about supply chains, but that is a factor that has been driving prices and has been driving parts availability across the countryside. Orion Samuelson has an opinion which he shares on this week's Sam Says.
Now, Samuelson Says. Insight and commentary from Orion Samuelson.
In conversations with some of my consumer friends recently, I'm being asked, Mr. Samuelson, why are food prices moving higher? Well, we know farmers are always challenged by markets and weather, but they have an unusual challenge this harvest season, and I want to share this story from my computer news service that tells us why. Quote, Dale Haddon cannot find any spare tires for his combine. So the Illinois farmer told his harvest crew to avoid driving on the sides of roads this fall to avoid metal scraps that could shred tires. New ag supplier in Kansas is pleading with customers now to order parts for spring plantings. And in Iowa, farmer Court Collab is locking up his combine inside his barn each night after thieves stole hard-to-find tractor parts from a local Deere and Company dealership. You try to baby your equipment, but we're all at the mercy of luck right now, said Hollip, a fourth-generation corn and soybean farmer in Buckingham, Iowa. Manufacturing meltdowns are hitting the U.S. heartland as the semiconductor shortages that have plagued car and equipment makers for months expand into other components. Supply chain woes now pose a threat to the U.S. food supply and farmers' ability to get crops out of fields. Parts, new equipment, A combine maker in Nebraska, instead of cars in his parking lot, now has unfinished combines in his parking lot because we can't get the parts that are needed for this new technology. Just one of the ingredients why food prices are moving higher. Stay well, be safe. My thoughts on Samuelson Says.
Thank you, Orion. Those supply chain woes certainly are the bugbear of a lot of farmers across the country. And we're joined now by the author of that piece. Orion was talking about. PJ Hufstetter from Reuters News is here. She's an agriculture and commodities reporter. PJ, you and Mark Weinraub wrote that article on the shortages of components across the country. And you truly talked to farmers from Washington State to Florida, as I understand it, for that piece.
We did. We spoke with farmers, equipment dealers, suppliers to equipment manufacturers. We spoke with all of the big equipment manufacturing companies. The supply chain issues that have been plaguing everybody, that started obviously with the semiconductor crunch, has definitely been spreading into literally almost every single bit and bob. I had one dealer say that if the part is made from plastic or rubber or steel, it's probably on back order right now.
It is unbelievable. And to see growers facing these shortages as we're heading into or halfway through harvest for a lot of folks. PJ, what was one of the most shocking things you learned just about the supply chain while you were writing this piece?
Well, we've been covering the supply chain issues and the snarls that have been happening ever since the pandemic really began. The thing that I think was the most disconcerting is that for farmers, particularly those that are in the middle of harvest, it was really difficult for them and in times impossible to be able to prepare for anything that would break. Most farmers actually do understand their equipment. They'll get it serviced ahead of time. But I mean, you never know when that combine is going to hit a rut or a rock or something, and something's going to get up into the machinery and just tear everything up.
Did most of the folks you were talking to, especially the manufacturers or the suppliers, did they give some indication on how long these back orders might be with us?
It's definitely an ongoing problem. I know that a lot of the dealers are trying to be able to take a very conservative approach right now and planning out what they're going to be doing and trying to be able to sourcing inventory at least for the next 6, 12, 18 months. What pieces might still be in shortage, what might not, is totally unclear. The big equipment dealers or the manufacturers, the Deeres, the AGCOs, the Cases, the CNH, those folks right now are, many of them are going and pulling components and parts that normally would be going for assembling new tractors and new combines and actually putting those into the service market so that farmers during harvest have as good of a shot to be able to get access to those parts that they might need.
Now, which will certainly help keep growers moving during this busy time of year, but I'm sure delay the eventual delivery of the new equipment. And PJ, I know that supply is only one side of the battle for times when folks can get their hands on components. I know prices have climbed quite a little bit as well, haven't they?
Indeed, there's been price increases pretty much across the board, whether it's fertilizer prices that are soaring, equipment prices that are soaring, and accessibility to even fuel prices that are soaring. It's a very difficult time right now for everybody in the supply chain.
It certainly is. PJ, as you look ahead, were most folks preparing now for that spring planting season as far as securing needed supplies?
Yes, most of everybody from the equipment dealers to the suppliers to the dealers to the farmers are definitely trying to be able to prepare. But again, there's so much unknown. That I think is the most difficult thing for the sector right now.
Yes, there is a lot to see as this moves on. PJ Hufstetter from Reuters News, thanks for talking to us about this ongoing issue.
Thank you so much.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Thanks for joining us on This Week in Agribusiness. Disease pressure is a factor that impacts yield for every grower. Max had a chance to visit Will Cox, a farmer in Ramseur, North Carolina, in this next installment of the BASF Plan Smart, Grow Smart series here on This Week in Agribusiness.
Will, give us your name, hometown, tell us about your farm, please.
My name's Will Cox. Here from Central part of North Carolina, small town called Ramsor. Grew up on a family farm my whole life. We raised corn, wheat, and soybeans. My daddy has some layer chicken houses, and we do some hay also.
And you have a spouse too.
Yeah.
Share with us that side of your life.
Yeah, I'm recently married. I have a very supportive wife, came from a farming background too. She pushes me to continue to get better, to go harder. I help her on her farm. She helps me whenever I need her.
Talk about the lay of the land here a little bit. You have some highly erodible land.
Yeah, we've got flatter land at the river bottoms to hilly on the knolls, a lot of terraces, a lot of just rolling hills. It's red clay, some kind of brownish, grayish dirt, but a lot of it's mainly just red clay. Organic matters 1 to 2, a lot of CCs in the 5 to 10.
What do you typically see in terms of disease pressure here? Is there quite a bit ordinarily?
Soybeans we see a lot of frog eye leaf spot, corn, some gray leaf spot, Physodermis, both of them, but we saw good response out of the Bell team on keeping that plant healthier longer. Even when the other corn started drying down in our trial, it was very healthy, and it really paid, especially on these later planted crops. The fungicide is definitely, it's not if you're going to put one, you have to, because the disease pressure is so strong later in the season.
So the use of the fungicide allows you to double crop corn late in the season. Is that something you think you'll continue to do?
We probably will continue to do a little bit of it. Last year was the first time ever trying it, but it paid good. It averaged well, averaged around 160 bushel an acre after a 100 bushel wheat crop off before it. So it was a good return on investment for that acreage.
You really do like to try some things out there, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. We like to try different things. We're always looking forward to just trying something new every year. I like the idea on Veltima you can apply it earlier. We applied it at V12. We do all of our fungicides with the ground rig, so we need to apply it earlier so we don't break down as many stalks.
What's your typical corn yield as compared to what you had this year?
We normally yield somewhere around that 120 to 140 range an average year, and this year we're averaging closer to that 200 mark. So definitely a great year.
Thank you, Max, for that update. And if you'd like to catch all of the installments in our Plan Smart, Grow Smart series, visit the website, plansmartgrowsmart.com.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
It's time to check in on the weather. Meteorologist Greg Solier is with us. And Greg, the rainy season's gotten started in the Pacific Northwest. Are they going to get a much-needed drink?
Yes, more to come. Nice and commensurate with the start of the rainy season, typically in the stormy season, late October into November. You don't see it reflected here, but off into the Gulf of Alaska, one doozy of a circulation. We think at least the eastern flank and little disturbances here in the next week to 10 days will begin to move inland into the Pacific Northwest, where we've seen at least a little bit of localized drought improvement into far western Washington state. Cooler, drier air. There is a frontal boundary draped across Big Sky Country, and a much quieter scenario. Some sloggy feedlots, snow melt, and cold there coming off the season's first winter storm. And later on into the week, you see a little buckling of the jet stream. Upper level winds begin to come ashore in from the south and southwest. That's the front side of the eastern flank of that big upper storm. And so the moisture and the wind will come into play here, western style, later on into the week. Otherwise, a pretty quiet weather pattern and a warm up in temperatures here. Still plenty to go on the warmth here, by the way, into the northern plains and points out of the east in the coming days and weeks. Meanwhile, over the southwestern sections of the country, pretty quiet weather pattern. Warmth in the desert southwest, all quiet across the areas of central and southern winter wheat belt country, coming off the tropical rains from Pam and a front last week into areas of eastern Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Texas. And yeah, we had a little frost and freeze as well, climatologically normal for that part of the country for this calendar day. Here's that southwest jet stream pattern. A couple of showers breaking out towards Napa, the Bay Area on northward, maybe all the way down into Southern California. We'll see, but it is the start of a return to wetter weather here. Ridge of high pressure over the southwestern part of the country. Still plenty of warm, dry days ahead. More moisture, though, is needed in those drought areas of the central and southern plains.
Well, speaking of the central U.S., Greg, I saw a lot of photos from my friends in the northern plains about that snowfall this past week. Is there more of that on the horizon?
Absolutely not. And remember last year when we had that freakish storm in Texas and the cold wave weather conditions? Well, that really started the conversation with that storm system while it was located here. So hopefully it made it through A-OK. The moisture was of benefit, too, into the southern Canadian prairie despite the snowfall. Frost and freeze last week, milder Pacific air and a quiet weather picture, a bit of a front. Yes, we are a bit wet here through the Corn Belt. No need to worry or panic. There are milder and warmer days ahead. This weather system is a weak one. Moves on out. Nothing but high pressure, sunshine, seasonal to above on temperatures, moisture reduction, dry down values, etc. That'll come into play across the Corn Belt, and a nice breeze as well into the northern and central high plains areas. Of course, coming off last week's Pam storm that came in out of the Pacific through Mexico into eastern Texas. Just a weak system here and a couple of showers, but we have some West Texas heat still into play and dry weather over the central and south end of the winter wheat belt. Later on into the week, a front straddles the Rio Grande, a couple of showers and thunderstorms there, mild high pressure down through the Delta and a good part of the southern plain states as well.
Greg, from the eastern Corn Belt to the East Coast, what do you see this next week?
As we see it right now, weak weather system making its way out of the Midwest, upper Midwest, in through the Mississippi Valley. A couple of scattered showers. Yes, we are a bit wet around the edges. This will move on out, this weather system here, with cool, dry weather, by the way, for the northeast of New England. This weather system moves on out. High pressure, sunshine, milder conditions, low afternoon humidity. We'll get back at it for at least a couple of weeks into many areas of the Corn Belt and Plain States areas as well. A couple of showers for the northeast and New England. Down over the southeastern part of the country. Again, back into some scattered showers and thunderstorms, Delta region, Gulf Coast area. And we need some more wet weather for this part of the country. Drought here. The wet weather, though, is back across the Delta later in the week.
Greg Sodier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, Greg, last week's storm put some combines in the shed. Are they going to be able to get moving this week?
I think with time, yeah, west to east. You know, it's always a juggling act this time of the year. You want to get moisture in the ground before we lock it up and replenish the subsoil. At the same time, you want to get harvest going and complete on time. Well, little or none organized on the moisture scene here across the plains coming off last week's snow. Feedlots might be still a little bit precarious into the western Dakotas, the high plains areas, but drier here. And with time to the east, we do have a weak system that may generate some quarter-inch moisture across the Ohio Valley, primarily early in the week over the deep south and southeastern part of the country. Here's the rain-snow line. We start putting it in October. And yeah, look at the Pacific Northwest, Northern California, the start of an extended spell of windy, rainy, stormy, snowy weather and drought recharge there in the days and weeks to come.
Greg, what are you figuring on for Halloween weekend? Going to be warm?
Yeah, nothing too spooky. No need to layer yourself with all sorts of warm weather gear over the costume. Looky here, above and much above. So this time of the year, that's 60s and 70s still possible into parts of the central and southern plains, central and southern Corn Belt. A bit cooler than average here, and to the Pacific Northwest and sections of California. A bit of a trough, this orientation, and look at the moisture beginning to get going into the valleys, up into the Pacific Northwest. Systems will ride northward, dry out up near the Canadian prairie, drop south and southeast. Not the greatest of news with drought. Great news, though, as we pick up the pace on harvest operations across the heartland. Still some tropical systems off the Pacific in through Mexico and off the western Atlantic, so wet weather across the Gulf Coast area.
Greg, as we get into that first full week of November, do you anticipate temperatures moderating a bit?
Yeah, they'll stay warm. There's really no hard frost or freeze expected. We saw, a little patch of frost and some cold here over the past week to 10 days. I don't see an end of the growing season whatsoever across much of the plain states of the Corn Belt locale, so pretty comfortable comfortable, easy on the power bill as well. Note the trough of the jet stream in from the south and southwest over the western part of the country. We haven't seen this in a while. Not the way the whole winter season goes, mind you, but wet weather into the western states. Plenty of harvest opportunities across the heartland. More rain down across the Gulf Coast and Florida, too.
How about that middle of November, Greg? What do you see?
Boy, things look fantastic again. No need to rush it. We'll get it done from a temperature standpoint. Very comfortable. No stress on man or beast. Much above across the plains, Corn Belt locales, some cold air, Canadian Prairie, the western states. Look at the precip pattern, though. Across the northwest, southwest, the tropics are still active across the Pacific. Plenty of dry time and opportunities to continue on with harvest across the Corn Belt.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
Sometimes you'll see a tractor and an implement combined and you'll say, my, what a combination. This is one of those in Max's Tractor Shed, brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. They do have an amazing array of various combinations of cabinets, but the common denominator is they are so rock solid. Also made in America, and they look great. Go to storelock.com. Well, they have a Meekum Gone Farm and Auction coming up in a few days. It's going to be changing locations now. They'll be going from Davenport, Iowa to East Moline, Illinois. That auction is coming up the 11th through the 13th of November. And the reason I'm talking about that is this combination will sell. Rodney Miller has owned this tractor and mounted picker. That's a 560 farm all under there, and that's a 234 mounted picker. And I will tell you, in person, they look just as good as they do on the screen here. It's a perfect restoration. Rodney Miller's name will be familiar to many of you. He hosts that program called Small Town Big Deal. And Rodney has always loved his international equipment from the time he was a boy growing up in southern Illinois. And he's ready to part with some of it, including this 560 and the mounted 234 picker. Well, there's some good stuff crossing the block at Big Iron Auctions in the week ahead. Here is Mark Stock with his report.
Max, October the 20th, we've got 949 items selling on the BigIron.com platform. This no reserve online auction features several retirement sales, including Roger and Janet Ample's retirement sale. They have got 69 items. They're from Sarles, North Dakota. They've got a versatile 435 four-wheel drive tractor. They've got an Ag Chem Rogator. It's the 854 series. They've got a John Deere 9770 combine that will sell. Check out their Massey Ferguson Heston 9220 self-propelled windrower. Plus, they have a Case 9270 four-wheel drive tractor. That's the Roger and Janet Ample's retirement sale in Sarles, North Dakota. Scott Johnson is retiring. They're from Rolfe, Iowa. They've got a 2006 Broyhill 9690 Trailmate pull-type sprayer. They also have a John Deere 8870 four-wheel drive tractor, and the John Deere 4650 mechanical front tractor will sell on their retirement sale as well. Lincoln Electric System, they've got 62 items selling out of Lincoln, Nebraska. They've got a Freightliner M2 106 bucket truck. They've got a John Deere 310G 4x4 loader backhoe with extend-a-hoe. They also have a Vermeer V8550A trencher with a backfill blade, and they've got a Freightliner M2 106 crew cab service utility truck that will sell. So we've got some unbelievable, well-rounded items selling to the highest bidder with no reserves and no buyer's fee on the October 20th Big Iron online auction.
The FFA Chapter Tribute is sponsored by Nationwide, the #1 farm insurer in the country. To register your FFA chapter, go to nationwidesupportsffa.com. That's nationwidesupportsffa.com. Nationwide, we stand for you.
As part of our salute to FFA, we've been getting to know the state officer teams from around the country, lately meeting the folks from Indiana. This week, Madison Carnes, the Indiana State Sentinel, is joining us. And Madison, fill our viewers in. What are the duties of the State Sentinel?
Well, as the Indiana FFA State Sentinel, we really focus on that member experience, and that goes across with all of our state officers here. In our opening ceremonies for the Sentinel, it talks about through this door past many friends of the FFA. And it is so true that when we interact with our members, that we are trying to create those lifelong friendships. We do that through our chapter visits and our conferences and any sort of event that we host here.
It is very cool. And Madison, I'm guessing that member experience in FFA is part of what prompted you to join.
Yes, for sure. Actually, the reason I joined FFA was because of a couple friends. And ever since then, I kind of delve into the deep end for FFA. I did not originally come from an agriculture background, so it was a big adjustment learning all the new things about agriculture, but now it's become a huge passion of mine.
It has, and I understand it's something you want to pursue as a career. Can you tell us what's next?
Yes, after my year of service, I plan to attend Purdue University to study animal science with a focus in pre-veterinary medicine. In Hancock County, where I'm originally from, there's not a lot of veterinary medicine there. So I'm hoping that I could bring back to my home and help assist the farms out there.
That is fantastic. Rural America certainly needs all the upbeat, positive young folks we can get. Madison Carnes, Indiana State FFA Sentinel, we wish you the best of luck. And This Week in Agribusiness is proud to salute the FFA. Coming up next, biological products are growing in popularity, and Max sits down with the folks from New Leaf Symbiotics to talk about TerraSym. Over the past several weeks, there have been a lot of concern about getting inputs for crops here this next year. Max Armstrong might have found a solution. He brings that to us in his next story.
With the fertilizer market being what it is, the availability and prices being what they are, producers are indeed taking a look at maximizing that fertilizer dollar. The company called New Leaf Symbiotics has their TerraSym that they want farmers to know more about, and the options that are available there. Matt Helms visited with us about that.
We've been working a lot the last 5 to 6 years to bring our pink microbes to the marketplace. Third-party testing all throughout the process, and we're seeing some really positive early results out in the field with our corn and soybean biostimulant products. And we've recently worked to adjust the delivery method to be through a planter box or with your seed lubricant, getting really positive feedback as we look to scale the offerings here now for farmers for the 22 crop year.
So you'll be ready to go with those options in the 2022 planting season?
Absolutely. We've actually just recently worked on some key agreements in the marketplace. So one is we've announced an agreement with Meristem Crop Performance. It's a new wave outlet or distribution market, very efficient and fast moving in the channel, both to traditional retail as well as to farmers. And they're going to be offering a co-pack of our seed lubricant of talc and graphite from Talc USA, as well as our pink microbes in the marketplace. We also have what's really exciting is a combination of a new soy lubricant called Dust, Low Mutec Dust. It's a soy product. I think this program has even had it on before, where we're blending our M-Troph TerraSym products with this Low Mutec seed lubricant product.
And Dust comes from soybeans?
Yeah, you bet. It's grown from American soybeans. It's supported by the United Soybean Board, and we're really excited about working with this this farmer-driven initiative really to bring U.S. soybeans in a new way to the marketplace.
The yield expectations in using your product, they're not out of this world. I mean, they're realistic expectations, incremental expectations, correct?
Absolutely, Max. So again, a big belief on New Leaf, a lot of science. We're based out of the Danforth Plant Science Center. What we've seen is around 2 bushel yield increase on soybeans and 4.5 bushel on corn. And this is all third-party, large-scale, real-world data. The 5 years before that, we did all third-party contract researchers, and it came in at or even slightly above those levels as well. 75 to 80% win rates. The bottom line for a farmer is at about $4.35 per acre is our price point. 1,000 acres of our TerraSym products will provide a net return of about $20,000. So we're pricing this for penetration. We're getting really good receptivity from some of these new distributors, farmer feedback. And yeah, we're even selling the product directly online for those that want to, sit home late at night on their iPad and shop at 11 o'clock at night.
So there are options for obtaining the product.
What we're seeing, Max, is this marketplace is very dynamic, okay? And farmers are looking for new solutions. They're trying to take advantage and look for that incremental bushel, but also with the environment that we're in with higher fertilizer prices, can you get more nutrients out of what's already in that soil? We've seen that with our Pearson technology, incremental increases in both micro and macro nutrients. We've tested this through the Danforth Plant Science Center, over 2,300 photos of the root images, seeing increased root mass and depth out there, getting key nutrients like iron, manganese, and nitrogen into that corn and soybean plant. The other thing that we're really excited about is we've recently submitted in the early part of 21 our corn rootworm mitigation Terrasim strain. So we've seen great yield impacts and benefit of this product both with and without corn rootworm biotech traits. And we're looking at a 2023 soft launch, assuming traditional regulatory approvals both at the federal and state level.
What if a grower wants more information?
You know, what's really neat here is we're supporting distribution, but we're also selling online directly through our website at New Leaf Symbiotics or newleafsym.com. That's the best way to really seek out information, but also our Twitter account is very active. We are just seeing early yield results that are looking very much in line or even a little bit above what we've seen historically. But as we get those yield results, we post all of them online. We post the wins, and if there's losses, we post those as well. And we'll have those on Twitter as well.
Adding a couple of bushels on soybeans, maybe more than 4 bushels on corn, Matt Helm shared with us. New Leaf Symbiotics, we appreciate the visit.
Thank you, Max. Innovation is continuous in agriculture, and we'll continue bringing you those stories here on This Week in Agribusiness. Thanks for tuning in this week, folks. For those of you out in combines, trucks, tractors, or semis over the next week, stay safe. We look forward to you joining us right here next week on This Week in Agribusiness.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by OMAX Communication in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.